Skylar Hoke here, joined as always, Tom Jacobs. Tom, how are we doing today?
Yeah, I feel a lot better when I actually get off the board this year. I find it, I'm finding it really tough at the moment. And this is on both tours, and I guess it's like we've just been fortunate in the past, I guess, that we get off the ground quite early. Then that takes the stress away, and then you just I think you see things a little bit clearer. The first few weeks this year, I've just not been close. And then when I have, something's just completely ripped. Like, we should have got a place with Alexander Bjork when he was 80-1, and he just was terrible in the last few holes. And then Pendrift last night, like in Pebble Beach, just didn't quite get onto the places. So it's been close, but not good enough, and starting to hurt a bit. So hopefully this week is the way we change. I felt like we missed an opportunity last week, Sky.
Yeah, I mean, the tough part is, like, I don't know if I could ever bet 20-1 Laurie Cantor.
Correct.
I just don't know if I have that in me. Like,
but
it made all sense in the world. But I mean, okay, so then I would say the same thing. We probably should have bet 15-1 Rory McIlroy. You know, like you could have bet both, no problem.
That's the really annoying thing. So, like, I am, as people will know, I'm very critical of Rory McIlroy. And last week on the podcast on Lost for Words, I just said, like, I can't believe there's this much disparity between Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy this week. Like, I get that it's Pebble Beach and Rory doesn't really play there, or doesn't really play very well there when he has done. But this guy should not be these odds. Proceeded not to bet him. I don't know. Like, it's one of those ones where I'm never going to back Rory McIlroy as a favourite. Obviously, Scheffler was there, but, like, I'm never really going to back him at short odds. And like you said, I was probably never going to back Laurie Cantor at 20-1. But we discussed the merits of why we should be betting him. And I think we just need to view the guy differently from now on. Like, if he fully commits to the DP World Tour this year, I think he's a different animal.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably the best player on the DP World Tour. He's the favorite this week, right? I mean, he's right there with literally anybody. I mean, from a ball striking standpoint, I mean, he's so good. So that, like, I still don't know. I think he's gonna face a penalty when he gets the card if he gets it, but, like, he could do very, very well on the PGA Tour. Like, I think of the players of this graduating class that I liked have, like, the driving ability he has, like the Norgard Moller that can do that, the pot guiders type of thing that has the ability to drive it incredibly well, but then pair it with, like, the Manicero iron game that pops up. Like, Cantor has the ability to do both, and not many people possess that ball striking talent.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where we've had years of just, like, Laurie Cantor is a 50, 60, 70-1 golfer. He can do it in any level of field. We know he's going to struggle when he gets over the line. And then all of a sudden he wins last year, rededicates himself back to this tour, wins again last week in a playoff as well against a veteran and someone that played so well in the Open last year. Like, it's a good playoff win. I'm never going to bet him at 12-1. Like, to be clear, that's never going to happen. So, like, this week is just not a possibility. But I think he almost deserves to be 12-1. So then it makes you think, well, should I have just been on the 20? Anyway, you can't just get hung up about the things that happened the week before, and it's all ifs, buts, and maybes. I was never serious. Like, to your point at the very start, I wasn't seriously considering him at 22-1. So it's just more like, actually, when you look at it, it was a pretty simple pick, I think.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Totally agree. But I like to play for the long shots. I like to place bets. And last week, I mean, I was a complete whiff too. Actually, I felt overall like a decent card in what I think 5 or 6 or made the cut. Like, no one really made runs or anything, but didn't feel terrible. And I like the way. I mean, we've always been a fan of the Qatar Masters. I think, you won last year. We went 1-2 with our betting card for it. I mean, it's an event that I think we can have some confidence if we're in. We have a lot of alignment once again too, and feel pretty strongly that this stretch of the DP World Tour is still our opportunity, as Price is still in kind of a discovery phase, I feel like, overseas right now.
Yeah, and I think, like, I'll just be quite critical of myself. Like, I think you do need a couple of weeks to just get in, and maybe the reason why I've been so successful at Qatar in the past is because you're 3 or 4 weeks in, right? Things start to take shape. I was pleasantly surprised by the odds this week, and that's pretty rare on the DP World Tour. And Obviously, things have moved around since I put the first kind of picks out, but like there was one player in particular that we'll come on to that I didn't even send over to you in my first group of picks because I just assumed it'd be half the price. And he's come out and he's a number that he is, and I just think that's completely wrong. So there's a lot of kind of, we talked about this last week, Sky, about kind of just not backing people that are just giving that very obvious lead in form. But this feels like an event where that does kind of matter, and the prices are kind of dictated that we've gone that way rather than trying to sort of read too much in between the weeds. We'll obviously have some other people to talk about, but I think some of them are right in front of you this week.
For sure. And in addition to the history here, kind of annoying, I think there's been a lot of corollaries that we've used over the years with this course, specifically at Doha. I don't know if you want to kind of go into some of the things that pop in your head, but a windy track that we've seen some elements definitely come into play. Last year was winner Hoshino over Ugo. Last year, a pretty good Sunday overall by those guys. I like to think of it at times as I historically was like a bigger hitter golf course. I mean, Valimaki won here too. He's not the best off the tee. I mean, Justin Harding's won here before too. I mean, I think a good mix can play well. I just know I've attacked it historically with some distance stuff. But Tom, what do you think of this track?
Yeah, so I think it's one of those funny things, and you'll hear it a lot, is kind of like links players have thrived here in the past. It presents the same sort of test that you see in links golf without being a links golf course. And you can very much point to that when you've got Brandon Grace, who won it back-to-back years, who had the lowest round in Open history. You've had Justin Harding, I think, has played okay in an Open before. But then you've got the real kind of Thomas Bjorn, Paul Lawries, Chris Woods, Adam Scott, Ernie Els, Henrik Stenson. Like, they're either Open winners or definitely should have won them. Paul Lawries obviously won an Open. You've got those names of, Jason Day's been a runner-up here, way back in the day. Sergio Garcia should have won an Open, has won here. So the difficulty with something like that, when you name Bjorn, Laurie, Garcia, to an extent Grace at the time, Stenson, they're also just the best players, right? So there's a little bit of that to it as well. But it does make sense that the wind's going to affect it. You do need to be a good driver of the golf ball at times, keep it in play. I think that's why you get the mix of kind of like these big hitters versus kind of short, accurate types. As long as you keep it in play, you're going to be in the mix. I don't think you need to completely smash it. If you do, then great. So I looked a little bit at kind of like Open Championship history. You kind of lack in that really in this field this week. But the other one is kind of the Alfred Dunhill links. I did throw up a couple of different names that I thought were interesting. And then also the Earth course at the DP World Tour Championship course. I just think you've had enough crossover with there, which again makes sense. Middle East, you can get a little bit of wind there. So yeah, I've purposely not got too overcomplicated with the course comps this week. But I do think it stares you right in the face. Windy tests have kind of thrown up some correlation, and certainly the Earth course at the DP World Tour Championship.
Yeah, very good for it. I mean, even some of those guys that you've talked through have also played well when they've gotten the chance to play Augusta National. Some of that, just a skill set type of track versus I guess it's more of maybe like a feel element that ends up coming here compared to some of the run-of-the-mill courses that you may get in the DP World Tour. I think overall, just the experience that these guys get playing so many different courses, that skill set fits a little bit better sometimes. But yeah, there's a lot of guys that kind of gravitated to there. I mean, at the top of the board, Cantor, Smith, Veerman, Campillo, Ewan Ferguson, Nakajima, kind of all those guys sub 40. I didn't give any really a second look. I mean, of the bunch, I thought Campillo was kind of wildly priced last week when he was close to double this. Plays, decent, and then ends up being a top 4 favorite, probably where he deserves on this leaderboard. Any other thoughts really from you here?
I wanted to bet Campillo, like full disclosure, like he was probably the second or third name I wrote up yesterday, kind of in my own notes. He's recently lost in a playoff at the Andalusia Masters, or recently enough. He's had the 13th last week. He was 13th as well at the Nedbank. He's had some decent starts. 2 runner-up finishes here. One of those was in a playoff. The most recent was a 5th place finish as well. I can't back him at 25, 30 to 1 when we've got the other players we're going to mention. And it's not because I don't, obviously he's got the wins and he's got the course history. Like I don't necessarily think it's a bad price. I just, the way I kind of put up my card, just meant I can get to him. And then the other thing is I wonder whether now Nakajima is getting pushed out to a price where we should probably be back in again. And I'm hoping that's kind of just one more week and we find out. Because I know he's had a couple of missed cuts. There's not really much in his game to suggest that he is ready to kind of win. He's had a couple of really bad missed cuts so far. But it's not like it's a long time ago that he was, playing well and contending. So I think eventually Nakajima could come back at a decent price.
It's hard for me to say this because I'm always like the lover of the profile, but I'm starting to get like pretty worried about the elevation of some of those Japanese golfers who have came from that tour when it gets to bigger time events. I mean, I wanted to be really gung ho on Kanaya as a PGA Tour rookie this year, and like him, Shugo, if you talk about Nakajima, they have to do something in the Zozos and the PGA Tour events and the major championships. It's been a tougher track record for those guys, and I mean, full disclosure, I've been always kind of ripping them in these spots, and I'm starting to need to see more out of these. And I mean, the rest probably is true on a lot of other golfers that kind of get that order of merit exemption too, to really see something before you fully dive in. But when I was writing up Kanaya, must have been the Sony Open. I was like, man, these track records for someone like him haven't really lived up to par. So I need to see it from Nakajima a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think I think when we talked through, did you put Nakajima up as kind of like one of your favorite plays last, like for the?
I think it was last year when he got his card. He was my pick to make it. Yes.
Talk, all right. And I remember sort of being a bit cautious then of just like, but my thing was kind of like, I might just take him a little while to settle, and he may play between the two tours. He really does seem to have struggled acclimating to this level, and then certainly on the PGA Tour, you're getting a lot of that. And I think what that actually does, and this is a bit more of a golf history thing, but I think when you think back to people like Ryo Ishikawa and players like that, of just how impressive they were for a period of time when they first got on the PGA Tour, and yes, he's faded away, but to actually make that transition and be the competitive golfer that he was. Tom Kim's obviously not from Japanese Tour, but he's played a lot of Asian Tour golf and then gone to the PGA Tour. Like those, Hideki Matsuyama was obviously the biggest example of it. Like those people, Sang-Moon Bae, Sung Jae Im, like there is a certain amount of them that just break through from the Korean Tour, the Japanese Tour, etc. But there's a lot that just are very good in the Japanese Tour, and that's it. And then you get the kind of people, I think it's like Sean Norris, right, who goes and absolutely dominates in Japan and can hold his own over here. Like there's a fine balance in that, and it probably just takes a certain type of player to be able to do it. There's such different golf courses.
Yes, for sure. And I think those golf courses have naturally not been the same skill set you need at a majority of PGA Tour course. So I think it was just interesting as it was a parallel there. But on to kind of the first betting individual for the week. I think it's you leading off. I'm deeper on the board, but do you want to go first here up to bat?
Yeah, so I've gone with Antoine Rozner, who is 40 to 1, and I'm quite surprised by this actually. I think there's an element of short-term memory here. One of those players that has gone over and played the PGA Tour. First two starts, he missed the cut of the Amex and then finished 48th at Torrey Pines. Neither of those give me any reason for concern when I think about whether he can come and contend at the Qatar Masters. Right, he opened with a 67 at the Amex, absolutely fine. Just I think he shot 79 on one of the rounds. Opened with a 67 at Torrey, and made the cut there. Tough golf course to go and see for the first time. If I just look back, he did miss the cut at the Mauritius Open, I believe it was, which is the course that he's obviously won at. But just before that, 4th in career at the Genesis Championship, 6th in Abu Dhabi, where he finished with a final round 63, and then 3rd at the DP World Tour Championship, where he was the 36th hole and the 54-hole leader. Shot 73 on Sunday in a really good field. I think that's very quickly been forgotten. And this is a player that has won the Qatar Masters, albeit at a different golf course in Education City. But when you look at his track record here, 73rd, 27th, 6th in 3 starts, the 6th obviously coming last year and being his best effort so far. I'm really impressed by that. And then you look, and he's got 1 top 20 in majors, and that was at the Open Championship. You then got 4th and 10th place finishes at Dunhill Links. Add to that the 3rd and 11th at the Earth Course, and then the fact that he's a 2-time winner in the Middle East full start. I think he's well overpriced at 40-1. Like I fully expected him to be in that kind of 25-30 range where Smith, Veerman, Campillo, etc. is, and that's why ultimately, like I couldn't give Campillo another look. I know that Rosner's form has dropped off, and maybe people are worried about how he's going to come back from the PGA Tour, but I just don't see him struggling. I think this is a perfect golf course for him.
I'm trying to look this up live as we go here, Tom. So it didn't really click for me about his early starts at the Farmers so far. If I look at this, okay. Rozner had 21 birdies at the Farmers Insurance Open, which was number 1 in the field by, so again, he finished 48th that week. And Harris English, for instance, who won, he had 15 birdies.
Yep.
Harris English had 8, or Stevens had 18. Luke Clanton 18. So he had 3 more birdies than anybody else in the field. I actually had this note written because I was ready to write him up for the next time he plays on the PGA Tour, because it felt like a DFS smash when he's like in the 6Ks with the scoring ability.
Yep.
And that argument right there just sold me on betting Rozner. So I'm going to join you on there, because that was 100% going to be written up on my next time, and it jogged me there because he was really good, just incredibly erratic, which is very normal for a player of his sense at Torrey Pines like that. So I think this is a great opportunity to get back in. I'm surprised he's not. Maybe he didn't get in the waste management. I don't get this back and forth, but it's just.
I think if he did get into Phoenix and then decided to play this, it says everything. Now I don't know that, so if that is the case, I think that's another positive. But like Sky, like I was fully in before you even mentioned the birdie thing, and then you say he's 3 ahead of Clanton, Stevens, he's 4 ahead of KH Lee and Thigala in birdies. You think about like someone like Max Graysman, who everyone's really excited about, 16. Ludwig Aberg tore apart the North Course on Thursday and has had 15 birdies for the whole week. I know he obviously had a tough weekend, I know that Torrey Pines isn't about making birdies, it's about hanging on to your score and those sort of things, which is, he's just not suited to that type of event. That's not his type of event. It's the first time I'm seeing that golf course. And you're getting him at 45 to, I mean, I guess he probably would have been, I don't know, 125 or something on the PGA Tour next time you bet him, and that would have been the reasons to do it, and the low 6K in DFS. But like, if we just want somewhere where we think he actually can win at 45-1, I think it's a huge price.
Yeah. I mean, I still genuinely don't like him due to the fact that this very event is when he hit that 40-footer to beat Guido. Like that hurts. And this 4 years later, it still doesn't sit well with me. But a little revenge with a 45-1 winner would feel nice. So Rozner, I'm in with you there. If we keep scrolling, we have. Are you in with me in the next one? I'll lead in for Joe Dean at 55-1.
Yep.
So Joe Dean, if you remember on the show with Brad for the preview of the year, Dean was my selection for a guy to earn a tour card this year. And it was only the selection because Brad was stealing my picks left and right. I had to kind of scramble to land on Joe Dean. And, I liked him a lot because of how he played at the Open Championship. He pretty much was the story of getting through Q school and holding on for dear life to get status into the card with an early second in Kenya. And then he, ended up ripping off, I think, 5 top 5s, through the year. And then that T25 at the Open Championship. So far, a 13th and a 5th in this season. But Tom, I've noticed one thing that was different than what it was last year. And maybe it was me not understanding Dean's game. I think of Joe Dean as playing these tighter tracks. He's done well, a KLM, a Kenya Open, that even, the Open de España, the courses that potentially were way more fitting for a plotter who just fairways and, just gets it done with a little bit of short game. Now, he's shown it a little bit last year, but last week, Joe Dean was third in driving distance. Now, there's the European Tour, DP World Tour stats, which takes 4 drives. There are 2 drives around, which 8 drives. If you use the IMG stats, Joe Dean was also third in driving distance, which is all of the drives through the entire event. Joe Dean averaged a little over, I think it was 310 on his driving distance. Let me double check this right here. Driving distance last week, 312.6. Second to Del Rey, over David Puig, over Tapio, all of these guys, that wasn't Joe Dean's game. I mean, last year he was decent off the tee overall, would post decent driving numbers, but 3 weeks in a row gaining on the field, last 2 weeks heavily distance related, paired with irons. I think he's elevated or done some type of speed with him. If we talk about the like obsession of speed on the PGA Tour, JT was the highlight of the story, adding distance over the winter to his driving game, and everyone was obsessed with that at the Hero. But I think these small stories, if we can read it into the data early on, like, he could be a very different player if he has that in his bag, and maybe he always has, and we're just starting to see it more.
So to give a little bit of sort of like a wider net, I went back 6 months for driving distance on the DP World Tour. In 55 rounds, he averaged 306.6 yards off the tee, which was 47th when you include every single player. This is Rory McIlroy playing 24 rounds. This is John Rahm playing 14 rounds, Minwoo Lee playing 12. So, you elevate him up probably 10 spaces for the fact that he's just played far more rounds than everybody else. You go back 3 months, Joe Dean, 24 rounds, averaging 312 off the tee, 313 almost. So it is just what he is. Now, that is a little bit of probably us misprofiling him a little bit, but also there is seemingly, in addition, if you look at sort of like data golf and just look at how much he's excelled in terms of distance over the last 2 or 3 events, it looks like he's definitely added to it. And if you think about you talk about players, lower profile players doing it, Hank Lebioda on the Corn Ferry Tour is playing exceptionally well. First 3 events, I think did he win one? Then he's finished like 7th and 3rd or something like that since. And when you look on there, it's the TPI Tour guy. I think that's what he calls himself. Anyway, the Speed Challenge guy has been working with him. So it all points to those sort of things happening. But for me, when I think about Joe Dean, one, you've already referenced the performance at the Open Championship, but just the fact that the upside of Joe Dean in one season is incredible. 5th at Sadal, 2nd at the KLM where he is in the playoff, 25th at the Open Championship, 5th at the Danish Golf Championship, 3rd at the Open d'Espagne, 5th at the Ras Al Khaimah, 18th in France, 13th last week. To have that many good finishes inside a year is incredible, because we see players and we talk about players and we latch on to, they finished 17th in this event 3 years ago. They've had a 7th on the Challenge Tour 6 months ago, and they just had 2 rounds in the 60s last week. So now's the time to play them, and there's nothing wrong with that. You do have to do that sort of thing to be a differentiator and to find the real gems, right? But when there's someone that is very clearly just got this huge upside in his game, has already been in contention. He didn't really do an awful lot wrong to lose that KLM, as far as I remember. He actually gains almost every time he tees it up off the tee. It's only the Irish Open where he struggled. And then you look at his approach play, and it's been good for, pretty much since he's been on tour. He's had a couple of blips, right? He is just a very good golfer. He didn't have the the couple of different. Like, I was hoping he had a really good Dunhill links. I was hoping he'd had a good. He got to the DP World Tour Championship and played well. He didn't. He finished 40th. But first time he would have played the Earth course, and the fact that he even got there was a major achievement. He actually hit his irons incredibly well at the Dunhill links and just had a poor putting week. So, to me, looking at the wider body of work of how well he played at the Open, how well he played in 5 other events last season, I think just a high upside player. It might not be the easiest to predict, and we're finding that with, okay, is he actually a long hitter? And that's what we should be sort of talking about. But really, the only downside in his game is his short game. And you hear him talk in interviews, and they like the fact that he never goes to the range, right? And he turns up, hits a few chips and putts and goes. It's because he's so in control of everything else. He just needs to sort that short game out. So very high on Joe Dean going forward. And I think 55-1 in this caliber of field is a gift.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think a big year ahead. Next up, so we'll be 3 for 3 on alignments to kick it off. And realistically, our card is very lockstep. I thought last week we were 2. We talked 55s for Dean. We talked 40s, 45s for Rozner. Why in the world is Ivan Cantero 70-1? 70-1. It doesn't make sense. And I will bring this back. Ivan Cantero Gutierrez, when he was first on tour, forever holds a spot in my heart, because this guy 10 years ago, when the stats are, 10 years ago, whenever DP World Tour unlocked their stats, strokes gained for the first time, probably 6 years ago, it was a year Guido got through Q School. It's how I found Guido. I used to stay up every night to where the DP World Tour finished and updated their stats, and I would update them to see the individual leader per rounds numbers, because the only way you could do it, if you had the stats the day before, the day after, calculate the difference to see who played well that day. And Cantero Gutierrez would set records for his ball striking, only to find out a few years later that there was definite errors going on with the numbers. But if you would tell me 6 years later that he is on track to get a PGA Tour card, my mind would have been blown, because he was missing every cut. He was 1,000-1. I would bet on him. It wouldn't make sense. But I also found Guido with the same mythology, and that one worked out. So that's all right in that method. But just the price. I mean, he's a top 5 player on the DP World Tour right now, right? Back-to-back T6s, T5s, right? For him, he's driving the ball. He led the field and off the tee back-to-back weeks. I don't know what more we could say.
He's had 3 top 6 finishes in his last 7 starts. He was 31st at the Dubai Desert Classic, 5th Ras Al Khaimah, 4th last week in Bahrain. He opened with a 73 last week and still finished 1 shot shy of the playoff, and he bogeyed
18.
Yeah. And he also had a couple of chances at 15 and 16 where he could have made birdie, so he could have cancelled that out.
Yeah.
I know it's all if buts and maybe, but realistically he could have won, because he should have probably birdied one of those 15 and 16 and not bogeyed the 18th. And he's done that from a position of opening with a 73. And I think that's a massive sign of a really solid, good golfer. If you can come back, because regardless whether it's the wrong side of the draw or, pace of play or whatever it is that can actually, catch you out, regardless of what's happened, if you've started that poorly on a Thursday, to then have that opportunity on Sunday to win is incredible. He has led the field in strokes gained off the tee 3 times his last 7 starts, 2nd and 5th on 2 of the other occasions. As you said, probably one of the best, probably him and Laurie Cantor, I guess, 2 best drivers of the golf ball on tour at the moment. And I want to look back at sort of the 2 starts. This might have just about held his price, is that he's played here twice already and he's missed the cut. Sometimes I think it's the unknown that leads to people being shorter odds, right? Like if he'd never played here, I think he would have been kind of 50-1. When people can see he's missed the cut, but to your point, he missed every single cut basically in his debut season, and he actually opened here with a round of 69. He sat 10th after round 1, and that just already in my head makes me think actually it's probably a perfect golf course for him. And now he's a better golfer. He can do it. Missed the cut last year, but he shot rounds of 73, 72 at a really tough golf course. So I think, Cantero 70-1 is a ridiculous price. As I said to you, I sent you my short list this morning. I had sort of 4 or 5 golfers on it, and he wasn't on there because I just assumed he'd be 35 to 1. And I wouldn't, full disclosure, I wouldn't back him at 35 to 1 because I think sometimes it's just like you're waiting for something to happen and might not because it's 6th, 5th, or 6th, 4th, and win is hard to predict. But when he's that number, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm with it. I mean, 50, even if he was 50s, I would have been on him this week at the numbers. Yeah, you see the 33s and stuff, which he could easily have been priced this week. I agree with you. I'm in, and you've sold me on 2 golfers kind of in prep prior to this. The other one being one of the playoff losers last week who also bogeyed the 72nd hole. Tom, why are we going back in on Pablo?
Pablo Larrazabal, so I get it. He was 200 to 1 last week, I think. And people are going to see 80, 90 to 1 and go, do you know what, you've missed the boat. And I do get that. And I have been guilty of times of trying to chase the Pablo Larrazabal form line. He's finished top 5 here twice. He's got 4 other top 25 finishes, including 16th and 24th, which came in the last 2 years. When he was 5th here in 2022, he was leading after rounds 1 and 2. And that added to his 4th a couple of years before that as well. He's also been the first round leader in the past. So course record, absolutely fine. Does everything we need him to do, right? When I think about Larrazabal, and he's a 9-time DP World Tour winner with 2 playoff losses. So he could conceivably be 10 or 11-time winner. And then I look at 2022, he won the My Life Golf Open. And that was when he finished 3rd at the Ras Al Khaimah the start before. And then the ISPS Handling came 3 starts later. And that was after finishing 5th in this event. So to be able to back that many results up in a row is unbelievable, especially at this point of his career. When you look back throughout his career, he doesn't necessarily do that kind of trending form of 21st, 8th, 6th win, but he does do 3rd win, 15th, 10th win. Like he's very abrupt, right? And I just think you just dive on that curve. I get it, he's 90 to 1 this week versus 200 to 1 last week. There was people did back him, and I think there's people, because they see Pablo Larrazabal at 200 to 1, just go, yeah, whatever, I'm fine with that. There wasn't really too much in his locker. He's been terrible with his irons for a year. His putting was awful the last time we saw him. But now we've got this kind of second to hold on to and the course form. I'd rather back him at 80 to 1 this week than I would have done 200 to 1 last week. I'm not sad at all that I missed out on the 200 to 1 last week because I just would not have got there. Whereas if he wins at 80s this week and I wasn't on, I'd feel really stupid.
So, if I think through stats like the Rozner one we talked through on what it was, and really the push, the gentle push from you being on is kind of what I needed, because you get in these spots without paying attention and tracking guys and the little things like that. You won't realize after the week that I think it was 75% of the players in the top 20 last week came from the AM PM wave split, right? It was almost 2.5 strokes. People were just blown out. See, 2 weeks in a row that has kind of happened. And when you see golfers overperform from the opposite wave, it doesn't show in stats, right? Pablo and Puig were the 2 from that side who had played well and got up there into contention. So hit his irons well, everything that you added to it, plus overcoming a 2-stroke deficit, and realistically should have won that event. Absolutely. I think that's worth, and at the same time, so 90 to 1 here. The bet that I pretty much had penciled in that I'm going to not end up being on, the DP World Tour, like these odds are weird because these guys in this 40 to 100 range or 90 range feel like they should be almost cut in half for a lot of them. I get Pablo still being 90 maybe, but you could have priced him at 66s, 55s, and no one would have batted an eye to kind of protect yourself. But then like the guy that I really wanted to bet was Eddie Pepperell. And I kind of had that locked in the sense of, okay, Eddie's 250 in this field, he's 200, he's at least up there, and he's, double digits in some spots, 90s, 100 in spots. I mean, Eddie played good at Q School. And then I think of the link stuff that he's done well on, you talked about, he's won here in the past too. And then he was the 54-hole leader in Mauritius when the whole world's rooting for you. right? But I just can't do it at a price there when I have a limited amount of golfers I can bet. I can't just, I'm just not going to bet 8, 9, 10 golfers unless I'm really allocating to triple digits only. So for me, like if I think about the price difference of or player difference of Pablo to Eddie, I think it's pretty stark in the 10-point gap.
Yeah, and I think you've got Eddie's got the win and the fourth here versus Larrazabal's fourth and sixth or whatever, right? But then you've got Larrazabal who's got 9 DP World Tour wins versus Eddie who's got 2. And I know
Well,
one of them.
and like a seat, like I mean, Eddie was awful last year, right? I mean, awful. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Awful enough that he had to go back and get a go to Q school. It doesn't have status. He doesn't have status right now.
He is all like he has been awful for a long time. Like there's no two ways about it. He's been bad for a period of time, and like I really like Eddie Pepperell, and I really want him to succeed. And it took him a long time to get that first win, and then when he did, he backed it up really quickly. And I think that sticks in people's minds. And I don't know about you, Sky, but like 2018 doesn't feel like a long time ago to me. So when you hear 2018, oh, he won in 2018, you're like, yeah, great, fine. That was 7 years ago now. Like it's 7 years ago since the Eddie Pepperell won, and people will still think about the fact that he lost the Irish Open in the playoff, and that was 10 years ago. Like, whereas Larrazabal's won 4 times since the start of 2022. So. But I think if Eddie Pepperell was one of those that he finishes top 20 every week and he's got that win, then I'd say, yeah, you're hard to, argue with. But these are 2 golfers that are extremely volatile and will just pick it up any 2 weeks, right? And Larrazabal's is just a better version of Pepperell, I guess. This is the short story.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately kind of where I'm landing on too. I think, Casey Jarvis, I think you could have made a good argument.
Yep.
He's somebody I still probably want to, I don't know, man. I feel like I just need to see a little bit more. And then I just really went into kind of some course fits. And I don't know, like, again, this is kind of the price if we talk through one being 150 and another one being 200. If I look at both of these golfers, one that you were definitely intrigued on, and then the other one who makes sense. We talked about the best drivers, Cantero, an unbelievable driver of the golf ball. We talked about Cantero off the top, unbelievable. There's been 2 other golfers who have been top 6 in off the tee stats in their last 2 events and are floating at 150 to 1 and 200 to 1. One being Christopher Wrighton and the other being Joel Moscatel. You want to walk through? You kind of had some Wrighton interested too. I mean, if I'm adding Rozner and Pablo off of my pre-list, I could probably bet both of these guys too. Let me think about it as you talk through Wrighton.
Yeah, so for me, for Wrighton, this is a player that I think struggled with injuries. He's been around for a long time now and just frittered between 2 tours, but he did win the Challenge Tour Grand Final, struggled out the gates in Australia, but then kind of made a cut in South Africa, 47th in Dunhill. But the last 2 starts, 36th at the Ras Al Khaimah, where he's 11th after 54 holes, and then 24th last week, where he was inside the top 20 going into the weekend. Then you factor in, to your point, the off the tee stuff. I mean, it's incredible. Like the 2 starts he's done, 6th and 3rd, the last 2 starts in off the tee. Then you think about the fact that he actually was 16th in strokes gained approach last week, and 9th in tee to green. I just thought he made a lot of sense from that standpoint, just from a purely he's hitting the ball well and we're onto it. There isn't a whole lot else. Like there isn't this kind of bank of like, oh, he's had a really good Alfred Dunhill Links 1 year, or he's a great Middle East player, anything like that, because he's just struggled to get to the top and stay there. But Czech Masters, 14th in 2019, big driving golf course, 5th at the Italian Open, 5th in Perth with a bit of wind. There are little things like that you can point to. And I just thought 150 to 1 was interesting in this field. I don't know where I am because I'm so confident in the 4 that we've picked so far, but he would be my kind of additional one if I went there.
Yeah, I mean, I still lean a little bit Moscatel. I feel in the, I mean, I think they're realistically both probably a coin flip to each other. I mean, Moscatel had the T16 at the Ras Al Khaimah, Boston just hasn't showed the irons in a sense that Wrighton has. So, I mean, I felt like he had a little bit more to his pedigree, maybe kind of leading in two-time winner last year, has played well at the UAE multiple times, kind of in his career. Australia, if you think about kind of conditions and things for him, when he first popped on my radar was that T7 in Australia that he had last year, coming out of, I don't think it was Q school. It was basically, he was an Alps Tour player at the time, and to do that in kind of one of his early starts caught my eye a lot there. So I kind of still lean him between, if I'm really cherry picking there, at 200s, along with one final long shot for me. Anybody else that you kind of wanted to discuss here?
Yeah, I had one, and the underlying stats probably weren't good enough for me to feel confident about it. But Kazuma Kabori is interesting. He's 23 years of age. He's from Australia. He won a couple of times, or three times, I think, as an amateur in 2023. He won the Australian Men's Amateur, and a couple of other decent events, the Eisenhower Trophy as well. Then he comes right out the gate, wins 3 times in Australia last year. But it was the 12th place finish at the Dunhill Links that really caught my eye. And I just thought, he had that 12th there. Then he finished 15th for the Australian PGA Championship towards the end of 2024, 34th a week later, and then 24th last week in Bahrain. He's not a long hitter, and that put me off. I know that I'm not hugely bothered about that, but like when you're not particularly long or straight, it's a bit of a concern. And he lost strokes in 3 of the 4 strokes gain categories last week. Just had a good iron week. So, but I just thought the initial body of work of, I was trying to basically find like a Hoshino type of who played well in Australia, then had a good week, and then came here. And when you add in that he had that 15th for the Australian PGA, had finished 12th at the Dunhill Links, I thought it was interesting. The thing that concerned me, he putted amazingly at the Dunhill Links to even get into 12. Like, it's very hard to kind of predict. So that was the concern with that. But I think he's a decent talent, Kabori.
Yeah, I mean, basically Elvis Smiley the next year, and sometimes it takes a little bit. I mean, we talked about the top, with Nakajima. These guys might just need a little bit of starts. I mean, we were definitely betting. I mean, that was a good comparison for Tom Kim. We bet Tom Kim in a couple DP World Tour starts at low numbers, and he did not play well. Like it takes some time and patience, and I often have zero of it and want to bet them immediately. So, but this is a little bit different than what I traditionally do. And again, I would have thought literally, like, I mean, I do a lot of my research pre-pricing, right? I would have thought I could have snuck this guy as he got a late add into the field, a little bit deeper than 200 to 1 that we have. I mean, he's as short as 100 to 1 in some spots, but we can go with the 200 to 1 confidently right now on Clement Sord. So this is one play and really one play only, and it's under the radar recent form, right? I mean, you talk about Challenge Tour for him. So he was a Challenge Tour, I guess, player this year, right? Based off of how he played in qualifying school. His starts or his finish there didn't get him into every DP World Tour event. So he's been popping down. So basically, Challenge Tour last week, 7th, week before, 16th, Mauritius Open, T13. So that's his 3 starts in 2025. I believe he was T7 or top 10 at least at that qualifying school. Week before that, second stage, he won as well. So we're looking at a win. We're basically looking at 5 consecutive top 5s, or I guess top 20s. He was inside the top 10 going into the final round of Mauritius, STC Open T16. Like, he has played great golf recently. If I had to guess, I would have said he was 42, not 32. That's also a little hard hitting as I'm 32 as well. So that hits a little bit, but I mean, I did peek back. It's not great history here. The only kind of parallel I saw, he was T2 at the Oman Open 2019. Sami Alamaki won that event. So that kind of has a little bit of justice there, but I just think the under the radar form is kind of flying, and he gets a spot to get back on the DP World Tour.
Yeah, there was two other Frenchmen I looked at in relation with Rozner as well, and it was Sord and Sadio right next to each other, right? But Like I think Sadier's form is a little bit kind of, which is why he's a different part of the market. Sord is interesting. My concern was just like, is it South Africa and bust sort of thing? Like, is he? I know he's obviously got Q score and stuff, but I was a bit worried that he's kind of overperforming there and would struggle here. But that's why he's the price that he is. There's one person, Sky, but I know we want to kind of wrap things up here, but like we talked about Veer Alawat last year very briefly. I think Brad's mentioned him a couple of times.
I was very close on him too. Irons were amazing last week.
Irons are good, and it's not like you always wonder. He's another one. Like he's played at a lower tour, and you think, okay, what's he going to do? It's India. Like look at his recent form. It's kind of like 4th, 3rd, 7th, but it's all on the Indian tour. Finishes 14th again on the Indian tour, then wins to finish the year. Misses the cut in Dubai, and you think, okay, he's just not made out for this level. Then all of a sudden finishes 27th for the Ras Al Khaimah, where he's 15th at halfway, and then 49th last week, where he's 29th at halfway. I don't think he's going to win, but he was 6th in approach last week, 36th overall tee to green. His driver's not the best, but like we've seen random names pop up like this in the past. If I think about, we talk about people that we were willing to back at like short odds. I imagine like Manu Gandas and people like that would have had like big places in people's hearts at times, right? And I get it. Like this isn't like he's not meant to be this big world beater. As far as I know, he's 28 years of age. It's not like he's brand new to the game, but he did finish 2nd on the DP World Tour last year at the Hero Indian Open. He's got a couple of good strong finishes. 5th at Singapore on the Asian Tour, 8th again the Blue Canyon, 7th in the Indonesian Masters, big Asian Tour events. So it's limited, and it might be that he just plays well in India, and we wait for the Hero Indian Open when he's going to be like half the price. But I think the number's quite good.
I can see like Kenya though, like Kenya Open could be pretty good too.
Yeah, like it might be like a watching brief to see where we can get him in some of these shorter, maybe some of these South African events, Kenya events, where the field is going to drop again after this week.
Yeah, because Kenya, is there a break? Yeah, I think we're off next week. Yeah, and then it goes to Kenya. Yeah, I think that swing. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head on waiting on Bradbury. Like Bradbury last week led the field and off the tee. If you told me Bradbury was going to lead the field off the tee and gain strokes on the green, I thought he would have won by 15, but he somehow lost strokes with his irons. But again, there was enough there that I was kind of interested again. But yeah, getting ready for it. The other Kuvra played well last week, right? Yep. Really good irons. We bet on him early this season, and he came back with a top 10, did well. Zihao Jin made a cut last week. He is somebody, again, you start to see a little bit, won everything on the China Tour last year. So if he can come together, probably maybe another made cut, maybe a top 10 after like the halfway point or something, I'd want to see from him. And then we mentioned him kind of off the top, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Justin Harding show life again when you get back here. He was good at the end of 2024 out of nowhere, but was hurt for a long time. I was super close. And you get something like him at 500s, like I wouldn't fault somebody to think that Harding had made a cut last week, has some life getting back to one of his favorite tracks that he played.
Another player that we mentioned off the top, just while I forget here, just before I forget. We mentioned Dan Brown and the fact that Laurie Cantor winning that playoff against a veteran and someone performed so well at the Open Championship. Dan Brown 10th for the Open Championship, 4th for the Irish Open, 3rd at Andalusia, and then 2nd last week. This feels like a good golf course for him based on that link. He's only 80-1, so you've kind of got to go, well, he didn't really hit his irons that great last week, and it was quite putter driven, but the result was good, which is the main thing.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, that's a good pickup. All right, before we go through any more, we'll put a bow on it. Give a shout out to all of our audio listeners. You can find us on Daily Fantasy Sports Picks and Bets. The Mix, available on all your podcast platforms. Rate, review, subscribe. Goes a long way for Tom and I, for Pat, the network as a whole, for Paul behind the scenes. Really appreciative of all the support you guys give us. It was great to see the YouTube comments back flying. And I made sure to go back and respond on a couple of things that people wrote in there with some good tidbits. So appreciative of all the love. So Tom, if you want to go back and review your card here from the top.
Yep. So for me, very confident about Antoine Rozner at 40-1, Joe Dean at 55-1. Ivan Cantero is still somehow 70 to 1. I imagine that won't be the case come Thursday. And then Pablo Larrazabal is 90 to 1. Don't know what I'm going to do with Christopher Reitan yet, but I do think it's worth a mention at 150.
So lockstep. So those same four for me, right? Rozner 40. If we talk Dean 55, Cantero 66, this exact refresh moment still there. I mean, as low as the lowest is 55. So there's good prices still available for him. Pablo at 90. And then I am going to go with Moscatel and Clement Sord at 200 to 1 there to round out my 6. Guido is in the field. I can't go a show without making sure to give love to Guido too. But we need to get him on the track. Missed a cut last week. He likes playing out here. So let's get some love for Guido. But best of luck, everybody. Again, off week next week, and then the People's Open. They say the Waste Management Phoenix Open is the People's Open. All those fans, they should go to the Magical Kenya Open next week.
Yeah.
After that's the real People's Open. So, but that puts a close to our show. Thank you as always, Tom, and we'll catch you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you, guys.